Hi, everybody. It's Miss Conway and
Laura Conway.
so what we're doing today is we are going to do a little bit of mark making and doodling, and we're going to be using a variety of materials. So I'm going to share with what those are, and I'm going to have Nora help point them out.
And so, Sharpie.
We have a lot of Sharpies. Now I know that many of you probably don't have whole sets of Sharpies. If you do, that's awesome. You can use that. If you don't have Sharpies, I have just like a regular black marker here. I think a pen works really great as well. If you have like a different colored pen sitting around your house, you could do that, or really even pencils. Another thing we are using today, hopefully you watched the Google Slides because it will give you more detail for today's lesson. But we are also using some watercolor paints. I have a couple of different palettes. You want to hold this up for them, Nora?
Yes, please.
Look, beautiful palettes. And what I love about watercolor, she's pointing out that you have color on this side. So here's our palette, but they last forever. I've had this one for years. You can still use all of this great color that's up here on the lid, all of this color that's in between all of the little cake pieces here, just because that's the whole point, is you add water to your color and it just lasts forever. Okay.
Yeah.
That was exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. And then, hey, if you don't have any watercolor at your house, hopefully you saw in the presentation, I shared with you some artists who use some unusual materials to paint with, things you can find in your home. So what I have done is I've made some of those. So here is some coffee. I brewed some coffee. Please make sure that you let everything get cool. So I brewed coffee, and then I also brewed in these little espresso cups and our awesome Hello Kitty mug. I brewed some different teas so we could get different colors of tea. And so we're going to also paint with that today as well, to kind of get a variety of mediums in there, right, Nora?
Yeah,
so,
right.
And of course, to paint, you should have a paper towel. We have a variety of brushes and different sizes. We're using old ice cream cups to keep our water in, and all kinds of things. So,
and here's my new stuffed animal.
Tell us who that is.
Brown Bear.
There's Brown Bear. He's going to join us for a demo too.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's not for eating. That's for painting.
Oh, silly Brown Bear. We don't need to eat all of that.
He spit all that out.
Thank goodness. Here, let's put him back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So our ultimate goal for this project is to create a doodle. So I shared with you in the presentation different mediums to paint with. So if you don't have paint, you could try maybe using some coffee or maybe a cup of tea. And after you let that dry, I'm going to share this with you. We're going to doodle on it. So I personally love doodling. I think that doodling helps you become better at drawing. Another term for that is mark making. Here is a piece of art that a student made of mine a couple of years ago. Many of you I've had in class before. We typically do at least one doodle project a quarter. I just think they're a beautiful medium, both the watercolor and the Sharpies. I think they just go really nicely together. And though this looks complicated, truly it's not. What he's done is he's broken up his very simple shape, a heart, okay? And he broke it up into different sections with a line. And then within those, he created more lines and shapes. And he just took his time to repeat those patterns over and over again. He did his with a fine point Sharpie, an ultra fine point Sharpie. But of course, you could do this with a regular pen or truly even like some colored pencils or even pencil on top of your watercolor. You can actually see in the background here, he has some beautiful pencil marks that he softly added to the blue. If you look at that here, you can see that. And it adds a nice implied texture to his beautiful watercolor painting here, and I just love it. It's a simple design. I mean, it could almost be a card. This would definitely be something I would frame and hang in my home. But I love that he did such a simple design.
And
he took his time. That's exactly what I was about to say, Nora. Good job. He took his time and he took this idea of love and he put forth a piece of art that represented that. And I thought that was a really great, cool thing. You don't have to exactly create anything when you're doing mark making. In fact, what I'm going to be doing is going to be a pretty abstract doodle today. So let's get started. Are we ready to get started? I'm going to actually kind of point the camera to both my paper and my daughter's paper so you could see us both. So the very first thing you need to do is, what are you going to use first, Nora? What are you thinking about using first? Do you think you're going to use the tea and coffee or you're going to use the regular watercolor?
Well, I'm thinking of using the tea and coffee.
You're going to use the tea and coffee? I think I'm going to start with that as well. So because those are already liquid, we don't really need to use a lot of water within that except just to clean our brush. Of course, if we were starting with watercolor, we would need to add water to our palette of color here so that we would be able to use them. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm just going to start doing some mark making. I'm really curious. I've never actually painted with coffee. I have painted with tea before, but I'm really curious to kind of see how it looks. So you're starting with the raspberry tea. Can't really see it too well yet. We might have to use a lot more color. So I'm going to use the coffee. Remember, it's all cooled, and I think I'm just going to do a variety of circles on my paper. So I need to use a good amount of coffee, it looks like, just to get some dark hues. On the video, it's not showing up as dark as it actually is in person. Just keep that in mind. So that I'm just sort of dripping the water, excuse me, not the water, the coffee onto my paper, and I'm starting with just a circle. That looks cool. Nice. I think I'm going to try maybe this raspberry tea, see what color I get. Cool. Now, if you have other colored teas, I tried brewing different kinds of tea, different flavors. I brewed a raspberry tea, a green tea, a chai tea. I can't remember. I think maybe a peach tea. And most of the teas kind of came out the same color. I'm actually going to mix two colors of teas there. Ooh, look, that's pretty. So what I did was I had the raspberry tea, and then I'm adding in this kind of yellowy color on top of that.
I also mixed colors.
Oh, neat. What colors did you mix, Nora?
I mixed coffee and that.
Oh, you mixed coffee and that kind of brown tea?
Yeah.
So my teas kind of came out pretty much the same colors, I noticed. Unless you have a pretty dramatic tea selection, you may end up with just one kind of color, which is almost the same as coffee. You could see these are the teas. They're a little lighter than the coffee, but that's okay. Again, I'm just mark making on my paper. I really have no process except that I just want the materials to kind of guide what I'm doing right now. This is, again, an abstract doodle. And if you looked at that presentation, you would see that a lot of the mark making is this way. It's just sort of kind of experimenting and just have fun, kind of play with your design. Using the basics, you guys, we all can make shapes. We all can create lines. We all can do patterns. We all can
use tea.
Use tea and coffee. That's right. All of those really simple elements of design that we learn when we're younger.
Any design you want, right?
Anything you want. Yep.
Yeah. Just like
I think this is really cool. I'm mostly using the coffee because I really love the color of it.
Well, I'm using some coffee. I'm mixing colors. I'm using coffee and that.
That's awesome.
To make this pretty kind of orange.
I love it. So I'm thinking about maybe adding in some real watercolor now. I'm trying to get this so you can see my paper better. So just add a little bit more coffee. I'm darkening up some of this space. I love yours, Nora. You're doing such a great job. So we're going to do this video in 2 parts. We're going to start with the painting. We're going to let that dry, and then we're going to do some more mark making using the Sharpie and pens on top of this. Make sure, once again, please check out the Google Slides. I know I've mentioned it several times, but it just has a lot of great ideas in there. In addition, it have some videos in there of other artists and examples of their work using these materials. So you can have an opportunity to kind of check those out. So if you are going to change over to real color, if you have watercolor, make sure you rinse your brush really well. And I'm going to use the red. So I need to add some water and kind of get a little pool of water on my palette. If you've never used watercolor before, the more water you add, the more diluted your color actually looks. So I'm just going to continue to add water to my paper. I'm not actually add any color back in because I want to build my color up in layers. Wow, Nora, that looks awesome. I'm going to add a little bit more here. Look at that. That's pretty. I love to kind of let the watercolor sort of put a bunch of water on my paper and then just drip it in there and kind of see how it expands. I think that looks really interesting. So it's kind of a cool technique you could try. Many of my students have done watercolor in the past, so I know this is review for a lot of you all. If you don't have watercolor paper, we're currently working on that.
Can you move
This one? We're currently working on watercolor paper, which is a thicker paper. If you don't have any of that, I do recommend, if you're using just like a plain piece of copy paper, which is very thin, try to not do too much water at a time. It will definitely create holes in your paper, which you probably don't want. And
mess up your designs.
It could mess up your designs, but so I would recommend maybe also putting some paper underneath, maybe double stacking your paper or putting some newspaper underneath as you are working with water and color or coffee and color. Oh, that's lovely, Nora.
So I can't tell them what I'm doing.
Yeah. Here, I'll switch it over so you can kind of see what you're doing. There, they can see your paper.
So guys, I am doing some free designs on my piece of paper. And like you see the coffee color and the color that I've been mixing? Well, that's the designs. And you know what this red is? The red is the lava.
Ooh, lava?
Yeah, the red is the lava.
That's a neat idea. I like the idea of lava. I'm going back in and using some of the coffee. And I think I'm going to go with that motto that less is more. So I think I'm about done with the painting part of my project here. So I'm going to wrap it up here in just a second. I'm kind of adding a bit more concentrated color
And
so that there's some areas that are a little darker and then some areas that are a little lighter.
This is the lava.
Wow, that's a lot of lava.
This color that I'm using is the lava.
Not to mention your paper smells really good when you use coffee and tea, doesn't it? I love the smell of coffee. Doesn't it, Nora?
Yeah.
You think so? Okay, so we're gonna call it quits for this first video. Say bye, you did such a beautiful job.
Bye.
I love your lava. And then here is the final product of the first part of my project.
Can I finish my